You're listening to Parents You've Got This, the expert guide to parenthood, the complete guide to fertility, pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. This podcast is proudly supported by Mustela, a natural origin skincare for babies and children, recommended by healthcare professionals. Mustela by Parents' Side since 1950.
Being a working parent is a huge juggle, isn't it? You know, students often get 12 to 14 weeks holiday a year, but as a working parent, you only get 4. So how does that work? Plus, you know, there's lunch boxes to be made, emails to be sent. They've got to get picked up at 3 o'clock, which most workplaces finish at 5. So today we have got our psychologist expert on to help with the juggle.
So we are welcoming Carrie Hayward, who is a practicing psychologist with more than 16 years experience. She has 3 of her own kids, so she lives this work-life juggle all the time. She is the author of the book series Being Human, and she practices in Melbourne. So thank you so much, Carrie, for being here with us today.
It's great to be here.
Now let's start talking about the juggle. Are there parents that come to see you about this? And for those parents that do come, what are some of the concerns that they're sharing with you? How normal is it to feel like this?
Incredibly. My word, very. And look, interesting. I'm seeing a lot at the moment of parents, mothers in particular, coming in as they're approaching going back to work. So a lot of the anticipation around that, the nervousness, the guilt starts to kick in. Is this the right time? Am I ready? And then there's challenges with finding care. Mm-hmm. So it starts right even, I guess, from the thought of it.
Yes.
Before you've even actually got to it as well. Yeah. And that's important to actually acknowledge, because sometimes we're sort of over-worrying about what it's going to look like, and we get there and then we just sort it out. In saying that, though, it can still be really, really challenging. And so I think one of the most important things we can remember in that is that most parents go through it, and there isn't going to be a perfect way that it all looks or needs to be.
And I think as a working parent, you feel like you've got 1,000 balls up in the air, always going, and you're inevitably going to drop one. Do you have any tips for, that juggle of working and being a parent?
Well, I love that you said that inevitably you're going to drop one. It's knowing that you can just pick it up again. That's the thing with juggling balls. We're going to drop them, we can just keep picking them up and keep going. So keep going is a really important one. It's interesting you use that metaphor, because I often talk to parents about this, and in a way to just be able to kind of step back and look at all those balls and just see how all these balls, what they kind of represent in terms of what matters to us. Because we typically get overwhelmed by how many balls are in the air, and then even maybe start to resent some of these balls. We put to those balls a lot of what we call kind of absolute and rigid language. So a lot of those balls we see of have tos and shoulds and musts and all of that. And sometimes it can be helpful to just see what matters in those balls. And sometimes think, well, which balls of those would I get rid of? Which balls do I want to get rid of? And get rid of the ones that we can. Obviously, that's not going to be fully in our control, or at least change the ones that we can. And then in terms of how the ball looks, what colour the ball might be, but then also look at them and go, well, they're actually all really important balls. They all matter to me. So sometimes, again, that reframing of this is hard and it's a lot and it's overwhelming, but which ones can I be flexible with? Which ones can I change? And also just seeing the value in those balls as well. Yeah.
What about the changing nature of the household? So when we go back to work, it might be that the primary carer that's been at home has been also doing the majority of the work around the house. Then all of a sudden they're back at work, both parents are working, and there's still the same amount of things around the house that need to get done. Do you have any tips or suggestions on how parents can navigate that shift so that one doesn't end up feeling resentment for the fact that they're doing more or, doing the things they don't want to be doing all the time?
Yeah, this is a really big one. And again, I think is one that will regularly and ongoingly come up for relationships, and it's because the situation does keep changing, as you say. So going back to work is a big situational change, and so I think sitting down, being able to kind of communicate what that might need to look, and so it might even be as sort of structural and planned as, well, let's write lists here and divvy up those chores. If, for some people that can be really helpful. And again, knowing that might need to continue to change. We sort of see that as a bit of experimental of, okay, this is kind of the rough plan that we can do for now. And then just keep coming back to the drawing board as well. And I think just being really aware of any emotional experience in that, because again, it's not necessarily going to look completely balanced or even. I think also bringing into that what is often termed that invisible load as well. And so having it really clear and something we can see helps bring visibility to that. Yeah, so it can be really important.
Like the mental load, you mean? It's all those things that just happen, for others, but actually it's taken thought and process and time.
I have to think about what goes in the lunchbox, not just do the lunchbox. And
there's got to be something in the cupboard.
Exactly.
Step one, think of what to buy. Step two, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and notice I just said have to as well. That's how.
But
But sometimes I think we get the juggle not quite right and we feel really overwhelmed, like, I'm not being as best as I possibly can be at work and I'm not being as good as I possibly can be at home. How do you deal with the overwhelm if it's just all feeling too much?
Yeah, it's again so common, and then typically we hear and even hear ourselves say, I'm not doing anything well.
Yes.
I feel like I'm just stretching myself between all these different parts and balls. And so again, just normalising that, what does even doing well mean? Again, there's no perfection. There's no one way to be doing all of these things, and it's not going to look perfectly when we are so stretched and there's a lot going on. So, again, normalising that, and then I think the other part of it is when we say I'm not doing anything well, what are we actually meaning with that? Because a lot of the time we can be quite outcome focused with that, and we judge ourselves and how well we're doing on what's kind of eventuating. The problem is what's eventuating or what's happening out here we don't have full control over.
Yes.
So we're actually taking a lot of responsibility for what is happening out here or what eventuates out here when it's not fully in our control. So we really want to come back to, okay, well, I can't control what this all looks like right now, but what I can control is how I show up in that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, doing well doesn't mean me being at every single school activity, function, sport thing, whatever, or doesn't mean, doing everything at what work expects me to do 100%. That's just not necessarily possible. Doing well means how I'm showing up in line with who I want to be in whatever is happening. Because we don't need to be there 100%. We can't be there 100%. We actually don't need that, which is great. What our child needs, if that's where we're, struggling with in that particular context, our child just needs our attention when we're there. They don't need our attention 100%. They just need our attention when we're there.
Yeah.
So finding the flexibility in that and coming back to, again, what actually really truly matters in terms of doing well. Yeah.
And guilt is such a big emotion. And something that so many of us feel in this whole context of, wanting to be there more or, feeling guilty that you can't be. Are there any additional tips with guilt that parents can sort of try to help them to deal with it? Because it can be such a destructive emotion.
Yeah. Particularly when your work doesn't let you get there. I think that's a big one. Like
you're trying to do it in when, make one part of it right to feed the other one, and you can't do both.
Yeah, even though your intention is.
That's right.
Say, it's huge. And with guilt, again, normal. I think that's the theme, isn't it? So normal and so human. And that's because underneath guilt is such an important essence of what makes us human, and that's what we care about. That's what matters to us. So we so easily misinterpret guilt as this feeling that's telling us that we're doing something wrong. That's how we instinctively react to guilt. It comes up and we go, I'm doing something wrong. I'm a bad this, or I've done that badly, or whatever it might be. When that feeling is actually only there because there's something that matters to us. So I actually gave an example to a client the other day that we were sort of talking about this, that responsibility that comes with guilt. And I gave the example when I was leaving one of my children at daycare in those initial days when he was having trouble sort of settling in and adjusting, and he was just in tears, and he's sitting there, and I was walking out the door and he's screaming, "Mummy, Mummy."
Heartbreaking, isn't it?
I think we can all relate. And I said to my client, at that point in time, I knew what I was doing was the right thing to be doing, because contextually, situationally, I was going to work, other things going on. He was safe.
Yeah.
I know he's happy once I leave, so intuitively I know that this is okay. At the same time, I'm going to feel it.
Yeah.
I'm not going to not feel that as I'm walking out the door and my little one's in tears. There would be something not quite right if I didn't feel that.
Yes. Yeah.
And so experiencing this feeling and going, you know what, of course I'm going to feel this because of how much I care about him, rather than I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess sometimes too, with this like guilty feeling, is because we're doing too much. Like we're trying to, like you were saying, try and do everything. How do you go about saying no to say yes to the important things so you feel less guilty?
Yeah, that's really important. So these boundaries that, we do need to set, and saying no is a big part of that. So look, again, it doesn't look perfect and clear, and there's no one way to do that, but it's just being able to be more mindful about what we're saying yes to, and prioritising, and that might be a sort of a day by day or a week by week thing we need to actually check in and look at, in terms of what's falling in our week and what are those things that actually maybe I can carve out time or, say no to that. And then in the process of saying no, which a lot of us find really hard because typically we fear letting somebody or something down by saying no, which is why we then end up saying yes and overwhelming ourselves with too many balls.
And let ourselves down, don't we?
Well, exactly.
To make someone else happy, really, isn't it? Oh, gosh,
Which actually is a really good point. And again, I'll often use the example of, well, we could say yes to everything, but if we're letting ourselves down and actually taxing ourselves by that, we're probably more inclined to then do that thing not in a way that feels aligned with how we want to.
Yeah.
So if I'm showing up in that thing cranky and irritable and frustrated because I don't really want to be here and I've said yes when I don't, then that's actually not what we're actually wanting from ourselves or from that experience. So saying yes is not actually what we need to be doing to be the person we want to be.
Yeah.
Being who we want to be is not dependent on saying yes. Therefore, we can say no. It's how we say no. So if I'm wanting to be available or supportive or present or whatever it is I'm saying yes for, if we can then actually say no or put that boundary in place, but be mindful of how I do that, those values can still be lived because I can offer a different way of doing it. So I might just simply say, I can't this week, but next week, yep, count me in. Or I might say, look, I'm just exhausted to go to that thing tonight, but let's catch up tomorrow. I'll give you a call tomorrow. So you can see how there's ways we can say no, but still feel really aligned with that person, friend, employee, parent, whatever it is that we want to be. Yeah.
What about our relationships? So when we go back to work, inevitably it does change the dynamic, changes the pressure, it changes the expectations, I think, of both parties. Are there any suggestions that you have for those parents that are navigating that and their relationships at that time?
Well, again, I think communication is just, it always comes back to that because not only does that allow for us to be able to open up and share what it is we might be, struggling with or whatever it might be, but it allows things to then maybe be changed where they can.
Yeah.
And obviously that being a really reciprocal experience because no doubt both are probably struggling with something.
Yes.
And I think to add into that, what comes up a lot I feel is, or what we can kind of lose when we're in that juggle and in the overwhelm of that is appreciation.
Yes.
And forgetting to show that to our partner. And often why is because, well, as I said, we're dealing with everything we're dealing with internally. But often what can come up also is that, well, I shouldn't have to thank them for that. They should just do it. They should just know to do it. And again, that can be happening two-way street. So but showing appreciation is not about the shoulds.
No.
It's about valuing other, and it's about connecting. And the value we get from that, if someone has just thanked us or told us, that they've really appreciated just that even small thing that we've done, whether it's something we do every day or it's something that maybe is, what we've just thought of that could be different, the value we get from that is huge. So if we can just do that a little bit more in our relationships, just sprinkle that in, which is such an easy thing to do, again, that connection and any maybe struggle or resentment or whatever that's built up can just fall away. Yeah,
being seen, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So you're a working parent yourself. How do you handle the juggle? What are your tips?
Planning's probably, although I say that with some humour because I actually don't think of myself as a planner, but you do it in your own way. And I think what I'm sort of saying that is looking at each day or looking at each week or looking at each month, however you operate typically, and just planning, mapping out as much as you can in terms of what you need to be doing with work, what you need to be doing with kids, and just reaching out as well. I think using your village and the community around you that's there, and people generally and genuinely want to help.
Yeah, they do.
To be in service of others. So allowing ourselves and allowing other to then experience that is huge, particularly with that juggle, because that's where we come from, being raised in a village in terms of our ancestors, and so it's such a big part and can make such a big difference in terms of managing this juggle, but also having that beautiful connection and relationships that come with that. So I think mapping it out, planning, being as prepared as possible, but also knowing that life doesn't go according to plan. So I think if we have the support around us, that helps us navigate that when things just, the unpredictable happens and suddenly I've forgotten the school lunch or I've forgotten that it's a costume day or whatever it is that we all go through. All go through. And again, that's, at the end of the day, those things don't really matter.
No.
It's how we show up around that.
And I love what you're saying too about, the village and the reciprocal nature of it too. You're so right. There's nothing that's more of an honour than someone saying, is there any chance that you could just help me with such and such? Like, yes, and then we feel, I don't know why we feel bad to ask the same. It's just, we're all in it together. Absolutely. It's about leaning on each other and
definitely
and getting through.
Absolutely.
Now, let's talk about burnout. So often, parents work so hard at home and at work, and they can find themselves feeling really depleted. Can we talk a little bit about what burnout is and how, as parents, we can ultimately avoid it?
Well, burnout is when we're at a point of depletion, where our body is actually telling us that it can't sort of take any more, and what the body then is doing, whether it be exhaustion, whether it be sort of some shutdown experience, is it's actually quite protective. It's actually, as I said, telling us something really important and getting us to listen to it. So it's really important that we do, and as I said, that can come up through exhaustion, it can come up through any kind of disconnect experience, feeling disconnected. Feeling a lack of interest is another big sign of that I'm no longer enjoying things that I usually enjoy, or feeling like I care. Like I hear that a lot, that I used to care about my work and I'm no longer caring, which is not actually the case. We never actually stop caring, but it's feeling like, because it's like all of these emotions have come on top of the caring. It's kind of like it's covering the caring. But that's what it feels like. So they're all really quite strong indicators that we're reaching that level of burnout.
And is there anything you can put into play so you don't reach that level of burnout, or is it something that everyone sort of faces along the way of the working juggle?
Not in terms of a more kind of, I guess, clinical experience of burnout, definitely not. But we can obviously and will have those degrees of stress and overwhelm. And so it's really just looking after ourselves as best we can, again, coming back to what I know works for me, what I know I need. So for some people that is, I need to make sure I'm exercising still, or getting out for walks, or, you know, getting into nature, and that might just be a park. We don't need to, you know, go into the bush to do that. Any sort of downtime, rest experiences, remaining connected to our loved ones, our friends. And I often talk to people, because obviously all these things can feel really hard to do in a busy juggle of life. When I talk about kind of making sure we're having these boundaries to prevent getting to that extreme end of burnout, again, a perfect balance doesn't really ever exist with what's the perfect number of work hours versus the perfect number of this and whatever. So I often talk to people about, let's just start with what are the non-negotiables, what are the things that I know I really do need in my week, and putting them in the best we can. Yeah. Again, it's not going to look perfect. It's maybe not as much. I can't maybe exercise as much as I typically did before kids or whatever. But getting them in somewhere, somehow, even if it's in a really small capacity, and putting those things in place in a non-negotiable, I need to make sure that in any possible way I can make them happen. Yeah. And maybe I need to swap the day or do it this much or that much, whatever it looks like is okay. But if it's in there, then we can be more confident that the level we're working around that, or the level of, you know, even the number of late nights that we need to have to maybe get back on top of some things, if I've got the non-negotiables already in there, and one of them might be I need to make sure I'm in bed by such and such 2 nights a week. Yeah. If I've got that in place, then I can be more confident that busyness around that I can cope with, because they're in place. And I can be a little bit more sort of more relaxed and not as sort of rigid about, or even worried about what, you know, that needs to look like beyond that, because those things are in place. And they're kind of my resources and filling up myself to then be able to cope with the busyness around that. So it's a much more realistic way, rather than sort of trying to map out this, as I said, balance, when we don't really even know what that means and how much control we have over that.
Yeah, it's elusive.
Exactly. Like if we've got a deadline at work, or, you know, we've got something going on with the kids, that doesn't just magically then happen. No. But if I can have the deadlines and have the demands in whatever is happening with kids or work, with those non-negotiables there, the non-negotiables are going to help me deal with the rest. Yeah.
That's very true.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for sharing so many tips and insights there on how we can all better juggle the work-life parenting balance. It's really kind of you to share your expertise.
Great to chat.
A huge thanks to Mustela for sponsoring this episode. Establishing a daily routine with your child can be beneficial for the whole family. Simplify your bath time routine with Mustela's Gentle Cleansing Gel and Hydra Baby Body Lotion. These are products with natural ingredients and are dermatologist and paediatrician tested. Mustela is our family's favourite.
You've been listening to the Expert Guide to Parenthood podcast, and never forget, parents, you've got this.
Join a Parents You've Got This masterclass today to be prepared, excited and educated for pregnancy, birth, baby and parenthood. Visit www.parentsyou'vegotthis.com.au and sign up for a masterclass today.
The information provided in this podcast is general in nature and is intended to support, not replace, a discussion with your doctor or healthcare professional. Parents You've Got This take no responsibility for any medical decisions made by individuals based on the information provided in this podcast.